Hello, I'm Barbara Suplee, and I'm going to share with you some of my reflections on writing my dissertation. First of all, the title of my dissertation is Reflections on the Barnes Foundation's Aesthetic Theory, Philosophical Antecedents, and Method for Appreciation. And I did my doctoral research while I was enrolled in Pennsylvania State University's doctoral program. Why did I select my topic? Well, the inspiration to research the Barnes Foundation occurred to me while I was teaching art ed courses at Temple University and at the same time attending art appreciation courses at the Barnes Foundation. I enrolled in courses at the Barnes to find the answer to two questions that had perplexed me most of my life. They are, what is art? And what identifies every work of art? After 3 years' study at the Foundation, I had a rudimentary understanding of Barnes's approach to the art and art, which was contrary to everything that I had learned in my undergraduate and graduate studies. But I didn't know if the Barnesian approach was predicated on an aesthetic theory, or how that theory, if one existed, was translated into practice in the Foundation's classes. Those questions led me on a 5-year search that resulted in my dissertation. My research questions were the following. Number 1, what is the Barnes Foundation's aesthetic theory? 2, what are the genealogical roots of that theory? 3, what is the Barnes method as practiced in its classes? Now let me give you a little information about the background of the study. The Barnes Foundation, a unique educational institution with a world-acclaimed collection of 19th and 20th century European paintings, educated thousands of students over more than its 7 decades of existence when I attended it. Yet little of scholarly substance was known about the aesthetic philosophy that grounds the Barnes collection and guides its educational program. This silence of scholarship on the Barnes Foundation represented a hole in the histories of American art education and aesthetics that needed to be addressed. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my literature review. First, I investigated University Microfilms International, a database that contains abstracts of doctoral dissertations and master's theses completed at over 100 colleges and universities worldwide. It revealed only 4 dissertations that reference Albert Barnes and the Barnes Foundation, and in each case, their focus was not the Barnes aesthetic theory, its philosophical antecedents, or the method as taught in classes at the Foundation. What proved invaluable, however, with respect to the Barnesian approach, were books and journals that were published by the Foundation. These texts also provided insights to the philosophical roots of Barnes's aesthetics, leading to the investigation of texts written by the philosophers John Dewey, Benedetto Croce, George Santayana, and Lawrence Burmeier. Because Dewey was the first director of education at the Barnes Foundation from 1922 to 1926 and a lifelong friend of the collector, Barnes's correspondence to Dewey, which is cataloged chronologically by date, 1917 to 1946, in the Dewey Center at Southern Illinois University, was also examined. I spent 2 days there. Any special definitions of terms regarding my doctoral work? Yes. Well, first of all, terms that are common to our field, such as decorative, illustrative, expressive, formalism, expression, and instrumentalism, were defined according to Barnes' interpretation or usage, very different from what we normally find in art programs. Other terms pivotal to Barnesian aesthetics, terms such as the 3 aspects of art, broad human qualities or values, and transferred values or qualities were also defined. Now, what about my research type and method? Well, my dissertation was primarily historical, but it also incorporated field research of an ethnographic nature, as well as an exegesis of my 3-year study at the Foundation. Therefore, a multiplicity of viewpoints and voices are present: that of the historian, philosopher, ethnographer, participant observer, interpreter, and analyst. Published materials from the Foundation were examined for insights on Barnes's aesthetic theory and for roots of that theory. This included investigation of the Croce-Santayana-Burmeyer connection. As a participant observer, the copious notes I had taken while a student at the Foundation served as historical documents chronicling the curricular material and methodology of Barnes's aesthetic education during the late 1980s. I also interviewed 40 individuals who attended classes at the Foundation at various times in the institution's history. A questionnaire was used to facilitate their responses. The limitations to the study. Yes, there definitely were two. One of the delimitations was the fact that I was not given access to the Barnes Foundation's archives. Plus, the other is the Barnes Foundation's lack of support in conducting research on the institution. In fact, they wanted to have the right to look at my dissertation and determine what was, quote, right or wrong about what I was saying about the Barnes approach. Now, how did I gather my data? Well, first, as I stated earlier, I searched the University Microfilm's International Database for dissertations and master's theses that reference the Barnes Foundation. 4 fit this category. I secured and read them, discovering they were not relevant to my study. But in contrast, an abundance of material was available on the colorful exploits of Albert Barnes. These were also examined, but for the most part, they too shed little light on my research interests. Then I went to the Foundation and asked for access to their archives, only to discover that the institution was in the process of organizing its archives, and at the time, they really were stacked in cardboard boxes, basically jam-packed papers in boxes, stacked up to the ceiling in a small room. Therefore, my request was denied. However, a few books and journals published by the Barnes were available from the Barnes bookstore. I purchased and studied them, and they in turn led me to out-of-print Barnes materials that I was able to access in the Special Collections archives of the Penn State Library in State College, PA.